1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, H-I-E-V-E-R-Y-O-N-E. I know I'm in a spelling mode here today. This is Jewish Talk coming to you live from NASA Community College on 90.3 WHPC. It's also streaming on your internet, nccradio.org, nccradio.org. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. This program is repeated on Sunday evenings at 11 p.m. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And of course, this all depends on when you are listening or watching. Oy Gewalt, oy Gewalt. You know what Gewalt means? It means, how could I forget to tell you that we can be seen live right now on Facebook Live at WHPC or on my own page at facebook.com, Anshul Pearl. In fact, Eitan Kilshafsky, who has a problem with his Hebrew, writes to me, Boker Tov. He is watching on Facebook. And so is Jonathan Wolf, all the way from Berlin. Ay, Gewalt. Unbelievable. Don't tell anybody. So, hello on the radio, hello online, and hello to the world. What on earth is Jonathan Wolf doing in Berlin? Anyway, we're going to first begin here this morning on a very, very serious topic. I'm going to be all over the place today. I'm telling you right now, if you have a seatbelt in your house, on your favorite couch, put it on, my friends, because we're on here for a ride you can't imagine. So my first topic of today is, am I limiting my options to find love? This is the question we received. Ladies and gentlemen, hold on to that chair. I can see, Eitan, you're slipping. Put on that belt. And definitely if you're in Berlin, you better put on your belt. My Jewishness, writes someone, is making it harder for me to find love. The more I get involved in Jewish life, the fewer options I have with girls to date. To be honest, it is making me hesitate before becoming more observant. What should I do? Asked this person. Take on more Judaism and limit my options? Or keep my options open and put the Jewish thing azoy on the side? Here's a suggestion. Here's an answer. It all depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking after a partner, you want a partner? No, sure. Any partner that suits, then it is a simple numbers game. And the more options in front of you, the better chances you have. If you have a wider pool of potential partners, we all know the odds are higher that you will be successful in your search. In this equation, if you're looking from that perspective, the vaguer, the more blurred you are about yourself, guess what? The more potential partners you will find. But that's my point, dear friends. That's only if you're merely looking for a partner. You're opening up a business, you want to have a partner. But if you're looking for a soulmate, a soulmate, it's another story entirely. What does it mean you're looking for a soulmate? Your soulmate is the other half of your soul, the missing part of your very being. You can only recognize your soulmate if you first get to know your own soul. When you know where you are going in life, when you are clear about your own identity, when you know who you really are, then and only then are you equipped to identify the other half of your soul. Some people have it backwards. They think that when it comes to describing who you're looking for, oy Gewalt, you need a long, detailed list of specifications. He's got to do this, he's got to do that, he's got to be that. But when it comes to describing who you are, you're better off by being blurry and general. My friends, the opposite is true. Know yourself and your own soul. Explore your Jewish identity and become comfortable with it. My friends, you are not limiting your options. You're actually, if you look at life this way, refining your search. I want to say good morning to Zalman Stewart, Weg, thank you so much. Jean Marie, Jean Brandonston, Linda Zellickson. I'm telling you, people are coming in from everywhere, all over the world. Okay, and Eitan Kelshevsky, he's Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov. And in your case, Eitan, you definitely have. Let's say a welcome to Lynn Feldman. My goodness, unbelievable. So let's continue now. That was a little bit of an introduction, my friends. And I want to talk to you about 911. When we see those numbers, 911, every one of us thinks the same thing. Emergency hotline. Our children know from a young age that if there's a problem, dial 911. But when did this emergency system start? When was it widely adopted and put into practice? I take you back to a cold winter night, March 16th, 1964. At around 2:40 in the morning, 28-year-old Kitty Genovese was attacked with a knife just a block from her apartment, and she died in her stairwell. The New York Times coverage of her murder stated that the police record showed 38 people admitted to hearing her cries for help, but not a single witness called to report the incident. Since that time, dozens of books have been written about her death and the lack of empathy and action taken by those around her. 50 years later, a new documentary called The Witness dove into the entire tragic story and reveals that the Times, New York Times that is, grossly exaggerated that number. There weren't 38 eyewitnesses to the murder, which began with an attack outside and then continued in the apartment lobby. Only a handful of people probably saw that monster, Winston Moseley, who died in prison a few years later, attack Kitty. At least 2 neighbors claim to have called the police, although police logs have no record of those calls. One neighbor, Sophia Farrar, did in fact run to help Kitty and hold her as she died. So good morning to everybody. To Levana Lichter, thank you for coming and joining us. So whatever the exact number, the bottom line is that people did hear her being attacked and did nothing. Her tragic death led to several positive things, most notably the adoption of the 911 emergency call system. It also led to social scientists studying indifference and what leads to people being passive and apathetic to that which is happening around them. So allow me to share with you a few thoughts on the dangers of indifference, because indifference didn't start with Kitty Genovese, with that story. I'm here to tell you it goes right back to the Bible itself. A biblical story that we just read in the last couple of weeks. It speaks about a prince of Israel, and a princess of Midian, who act shamelessly in public, together in a terrible affront to the Almighty God. This was considered a gross indiscretion. It gave a new meaning to public relations because they were having relations in public. The gross indiscretion was an act of 2 individuals. True, there were others who participated in this activity and responded to the seduction of the Midianite women, but it wasn't everyone. And yet, when you read the story carefully, when Hashem acknowledges Pinchas and tells us how this person stepped forward, Pinchas, and put an end to all of this, in turning back his wrath, it speaks about he turned back the wrath or the anger of God of everybody then, saving them from a collective suffering as if they were all guilty. Hello? What did they all do wrong? Wasn't this only the actions of a few? And guess what? What was the reward that Pinchas received for stopping this? He received the Nobel Peace Prize. He was rewarded for his intervention, and his act of heroism is understandable. But is the Peace Prize, Bris Shalom, really the best reward for someone? If you read the story clearly, what did he do? He stepped up and he created the first shish kebab. He brutally drove a spear through two people, these two prince and the princess, and violently ended their lives. So my friends, I know why you weren't sleeping last night. Why would Pinchas be rewarded with the Bris Shalom? The Bris, what I'm generally speaking, like a peace prize. He begot the covenant of peace. Was this really the most benefiting reward for what he did? Lynn Feldman points out that, yes, correct, Pinchas was Elijah the prophet. Nevertheless, our question is, what's going on over here? The most difficult thing to understand in the story is the reason given for Pinchas's reward altogether. He's not acknowledged for the Kiddush Hashem he made publicly. But he's recognized, you know what he did? You know what he's accomplished? Heishiv es Hamasi. He turned back God's anger against everybody. Hello? Didn't Pinchas deserve a reward for his behavior, even if the people continue to be punished for theirs? I mean, what do you mean everybody? What's got everybody got to do with it? He did something good and he gets rewarded for it. Why are the two intertwined? So I saw this thought, that the villains in the Pinchas story are not in fact Cosby and Zimri. That's the prince of Israel and the princess of Midian. The real villain, the real elephant in the room, was the indifference of everybody standing by. Those two acted out in public, and guess what? Nobody challenged them on it. Everybody watched, perhaps stunned, but also silent. Nobody protested or objected. When telling the story, the Torah emphasizes that it took place la'einei kol Yisrael, which means in front of everybody. There was no secret. It wasn't happening in some red light district. It was happening in front of everybody. Like I joked before, it was public relations. So therefore, there was a collectiveness in responsibility and in punishment. Not for the act of one or even a few, but because of everybody's own failure to see something and do nothing about it. They watched and observed and did garnished, didn't object. They tolerated the intolerable and created an atmosphere of indifference in which evil can thrive. Pinchas's act of zealotry, when focused on Cosby and Zimri, the two recipients of his actions, looks quite violent and wow, right? However, from the perspective of a crowd of passive onlookers, unable or unwilling to act, when Pinchas steps in, this was recognized as an act of heroism in an effort to restore peace. Therefore, he was awarded, yes, this peace prize, this Nobel Peace Prize, so to speak, because sometimes the path to peace is not through indifference and looking away. It is only with brave initiative and bold willingness to be intolerant of the intolerable. And I will talk about it more in a moment in current affairs and what happened most recently in the land of Israel with the operations of Bayit Vagan in Jenin. So hang in, everybody. Pinchas is rewarded for relieving the people of their punishment It wasn't so much what he did to those two individuals for their public relations. It's relieving, because the core of the story is not the act of the two, but, my friends, sadly to tell you, the inaction of many who were standing by, who did nothing, who said nothing. Let me share with you what the great Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, Alav Shalom, taught. And I quote, "Of course, indifference can be tempting. More than that, seductive. It is so much easier to look away from victims. It is so much easier to avoid such rude interruptions to our own work, our dreams, our hopes, our vacation time, our desires. It is, after all, awkward, troublesome to be involved in another person's pain and despair. Yet, for the person who is indifferent, his or her neighbor are of no consequences, garnished, and therefore their lives are meaningless. Their hidden or even visible anguish is of no interest. Indifference reduces the other to an abstraction. In a way, to be indifferent to that suffering is what makes the human being inhuman. Indifference, after all, is more dangerous than anger and hatred." These are words of Elie Wiesel, presented on April the 12th, 1999, when he made this speech at the White House as part of the very famous Millennium Lecture series that took place, and I know that many of you were there. Elie Wiesel witnessed and experienced the worst of what indifference allows and enables. Baruch Hashem, we don't have such horrific challenges, but we too continue to suffer from indifference. In the digital age, we are constantly exposed to messages that teach apathy, not empathy. Hello? For too many, social media is a vehicle to spew hatred, gossip, dishonesty, and bullying, and I'm going to talk about it in more depth in a moment. Of course, the perpetrators are the ones most accountable, but so are the masses, you and me, who see this stuff and are garnished and don't say anything. They neither object nor come to the defense of those being attacked or treated unfairly. When let's say, for example, like one of the things that bothers me to no end, people talk in the synagogue. I'm not talking about, after the davening or before the davening. I'm talking about in the middle of the davening, even when the Torah is being read. When there is talking in the shul, why do people talk in the synagogue? It's because the talkers are confident of the indifferent environment around them that will tolerate their talking. They think, nobody's going to bother them. It bothers me. When people share gossip, it is only because they are certain of the indifference of the listener who won't object or stop them. When people bully others to conform to what they want, they get away with it because most people prefer indifference to getting involved. These 3 weeks, starting last Thursday, for these 3 weeks in the Jewish calendar, is a very important time. It's a collective and individual time of reflection on how we can dispel the sinas chinam, this meaningless hatred, and show more greater love to one another. Avas Yisrael means hearing the call of those around us and anticipating the needs of those suffering in silence. It means sensitivity and respect to create an atmosphere which shuts down conversations of gossip and stepping in when people are being bullied, whether it's online or offline, whatever it may be. So the women of Midian in the story the Torah tells us last week, they were seductive. But as Elie Wiesel says, even more seductive was the indifference of everybody standing around. We must never give in to her temptation of indifference. Only by being intolerant of the intolerable are we worthy of this peace prize, as Pinchas received, the gift of true and authentic peace. I know this is tough, dear friends, for a Sunday morning, but you know what? I received such response to my Shabbos discussion. As you may know, in case you don't know, I'll let you into a secret. Every Saturday morning at our shul in Mineola, I give a sermon. It's the best sermon you will find in Mineola, and I think even Kim is she's never heard it, but she knows it has to be good. And you know why she knows it? Because if she comes by there in the street, she hears the Z's. The people account the sleep that goes on, the depth of the sleep, the complete. You know, I asked people after how was the speech? They said it was fantastic. I said, what was the best thing? Boy, was I in a deep sleep. I sleep better in the synagogue during your sermon than at home, lying on the bed with the air conditioning on. Come on. So, but you know what? Yesterday I gave a speech, and I want to share it again with everybody because it deals with bullying. It deals with what it means to be a mensch. But I know that everybody is like, how can I transition to this tough stories without a little joke, something to help us a little bit over here. My wife asked me why I speak so softly. Here, Kim, why do I speak so softly in the house? I said, I'm afraid that Mark Zuckerberg is listening. She laughed. I laughed. Alexa laughed. And Siri laughed. And I won, by the way, some years ago at the station, a dot, one of these. And I'm afraid to talk in front of this dot. I mean, I don't know. It's unbelievable. You're talking, Alexa's listening, and sie macht also mit der Hand, and she's clapping also when I make a joke or something. I got to be careful over here. All right, now let's get a little bit serious over here. I want to tell you what I shared with everybody else, and for those who are listening now, if I leave anything out from what I said yesterday, you'll call me up and let me know if I missed something out. Hannah Smith was a 14-year-old schoolgirl living in Luttersworth in Leicestershire. A wonderful, bright, outgoing, she enjoyed the active social life and seemed to have an exciting future ahead of her. On the morning of the 2nd of August, 2013, Hannah was found hanging in her bedroom. She had committed suicide. Seeking to unravel what happened, was es geschehen, her family soon discovered that she had been a target of anonymous abusive posts on a social network website. Hannah was a victim of the latest variant of the oldest story in human history. And what was that? And what is that? And sad it still goes on, is the use of words as weapons by those seeking to inflict pain. The new version today is called cyberbullying. And the Torah in our portion, just yesterday, addresses cyberbullying in this very rather fascinating way. Amongst the subjects of yesterday's Torah portion, we read of a census that was conducted amongst the Jewish people at that time. All those who were fit for battle were counted if you were between the age of 20 and 60. And Torah tells us they ended up with 600,730 to complete this number. And the census was conducted based on the tribes and enumerates the families in each tribe, right? We had to know who were they counting? They were counting all the individuals and names the tribes. What we find fascinating, and speak to Eitan for more details, is the tribe of Gad. For example, Torah tells us that Gad, the original, right, one of the 12 tribes is called Gad, G-A-D, had 7 families. Now, from the original, 7 families emerged: Tzafon, Chagi, Shuni, Azni, Eri, Arad, Areli. No, shine. Why? Because God, the son of Jacob, had 7 children, and each of them fathered a family in Israel. Okay? And the same is with all the other tribes. So we get a very interesting background and genealogy of all the different tribes with their extended families. So this list of families are actually recorded for the first time in the book of Bereshis, Vayigash, where there, Jacob and all of his children and their families who are about to relocate from New York to Florida, from Canaan to Egypt, it's listed over there. But then it was only 70 people. Now, each of these children have fathered a large family. And here we find a fascinating difference, particularly in the tribe of Gad. Rashi picks it up and discusses. Because one of the children and families of Gad, as described in this week's Torah portion, gets a name change from where it was originally written in the book of Bereshis in Vayigash. In Vayigash, in the earlier record, it speaks about God, the children of God, was Tzifyon, Chagi, Shuni, Etzboin. You don't have to remember all this, dear friends, but it mentions all the names. Again, Tzifyon, Chagi, and Shuni, and Etzboin, etc., etc. When the same family comes up in this week's Torah portion, it mentions all 6, but instead of mentioning the name Etzboin, it now introduces us to a name called Ozni. And the question is, what happened? What happened? So Rashi says the same family. Don't get nervous, he says. Don't get nervous. Over there it was called Etzboin, and now it's called Ozni. It's the same family. What's going on over here? Ask the commentaries. Why do we have to say that? Why say that? Maybe there was a Etzboin in the earlier generation, and that family disappeared, and then a new family was introduced of Ozni. What drives Rashi to say, the commentary, it's the same family with different names? Why should this be? And the commentaries speak about this. I'm going to give you the short version. If you really want more details, I'm going to give you the personal cell number of Zalman Weg, and he'll give you all the details. But what the cliff notes is like this. As the commentaries say, it was the same family. Same family. So why the change of the name? The answer is there was no change of name. There are 2 aspects to this one name. One is Etzboin, and one is Ozni. What do you mean? How can it be the same name? It sounds different. It's spelled differently. The Orach Chaim explains like this. There was something unique about this tribe of God. What's the word Etzbon? Etzbon, the root is from Etzba, which means a finger. Ozni means Oiznaim, it means an ear. And the sages tell us, on a deeper level and conceptual level, why did God give us fingers that look like, are built like pegs? To be able to stick it into your ear, into your oizen, that's the Hebrew word for ear. When you hear gossip around us, stick your finger in your ear and tune out from it. Today they sell you very expensive Bose headphones. Kim says, "What I need to use my finger? I have some very expensive Bose, or earbuds, right?" But the point is, on a conceptual sense, that the name of this family is the same family. Etzbon, it means finger, and Ozni means ear, telling us something special about this tribe, God. What is God? You remember all the tribes were grouped. There were 12 tribes. They were actually encamped around the four directions, the 4 areas around the temple area, the Mishkan at that time. And they all had their neighbors. God, in particular, more than others, found themselves surrounded by naysayers, troublemakers, arrogant individuals filled with gossip. Who were they? Let's talk. They were close to Reuven, the tribe of Reuven. Reuven were the ones who gathered together and had this terrible, uprising against Moses, together with Korach. Can you imagine living surrounded by people who are creating confusion? Not only that, they lived also close to the tribe of Shimon. And all the discussion this morning about the licentiousness and all the other inappropriateness was all promulgated primarily by Shimon. So imagine God, this tribe, are surrounded by such an environment, sadly. It's embarrassing in a sense to even share this with you all. How did their integrity stand? How come they were able to remain, above the foray of what was going on around them? The answer, the Torah tells us, is from the etzbon, from their finger, from their peg-like finger. They were able to stick it into their ears. They were able to overcome and not get sucked into the inappropriate activities and words that were being said around them. The Talmud actually tells us, why is the entire ear hard and the earlobe soft? Is so that if a person hears an inappropriate manner, he or she will bend the earlobe into their ear and seal it. See? God has everything in mind. And that's an amazing concept. They were able to remain, and the Torah tells us, all the way back in the earlier accounting of the family, they were called etzbon, focusing on that ability. They knew what to use their fingers for, in a conceptual sense. At the end of when we're doing the counting now, when we're talking about at the end of the 40 years, the Torah reveals to us that this is a tribe who are able to, in a conceptual sense, use their finger, their etzbah, use their abilities to overcome all the lashon hara, all the horrible stuff around them. That's why God is honored and why it's the same family. And that's how they protected themselves. I share this with you as we say hello to Jay Mustel and other wonderful, everybody around us. I share this with you, my friends, because we're living in a time now when we have to use our fingers more. We've got to stick them into our ears. We had someone yesterday, and he said, he was a doctor. He said, the best thing to stick in your ears is your elbow. He was joking, of course. But in a conceptual sense, we have to, from time to time, if we want to stay above all the garbage and all the negativity around us and the rabble-rousers, the insurrections and all kinds of rubbish that's going on around us, and not allow us to take us away from our goal in life, as we say hello to Patty Fuchs, we've got to use our fingers more. We've got to put our fingers in our ears, so to speak, to cut out and to block all the negativity around us. Let me continue this. A few days ago, on July the 2nd, 2023, NPR published an amazing interview with Sarah Horowitz. Who is Sarah Horowitz? She is the speechwriter. She was a speechwriter for the former President Barack Obama and for his wife, Michelle. This Sarah Horowitz grew up in what she would describe as a culturally Jewish home. Her parents weren't religious, but they sent her to a Hebrew school because that's the sort of, what is expected. And they genuinely, and by the way, it's getting less and less, by the way, off the record, less and less kids are going to Hebrew school, sadly. And they genuinely wanted her to understand her heritage and to feel part of a Jewish community. But it didn't really take. And by the time she was 12 and had gone through the rituals of her bat mitzvah, she was like saying thanks, but no thanks. Good morning, Jack Klein. In the interview on NPR, she describes how religion wasn't for her And if she was going to get spiritual nourishment, it would have to come from somewhere else. Forget about the Judaism. But that somewhere else never materialized. So, in her 30s, after reaching the pinnacle of her career writing for the President of the United States, this Sarah Horowitz was craving a deeper sense of meaning in her own life. And guess what? She found it right back where she started. My friends, check it out. She recently published her book. The name of her book is Here All Along. Finding meaning, spirituality, and a deeper connection to life. Where did she find all of this? Shh, don't say it loud. In Judaism. Yeah, this Jewish girl found her Judaism, found everything right back home. Didn't have to go anywhere. Sarah Horowitz continues. What happened was at the age of 36, she writes, she broke up with a guy that she was dating, and I was kind of lonely and anxious. I happened to hear about an intro to Judaism class being offered at in Washington at the JCC, the Jewish Community Center. And she thought, I have something to do on Wednesday night. They were offering, it was a Wednesday night class. And she says, I swear, it could have been ceramics, it could have been karate. It was just a total fluke that she had an open night and this class was being offered. What blew me away, she tells us, was studying the text in class. What were they studying? They were studying text about Jewish ethics, about life cycle rituals and holidays and spirituality. I thought, where has this been all my life? And she said, and she writes so beautifully, my friends, listen to this. She says, where have I been all my life? This is, as she was learning the Jewish text, 4,000 years of crowd-sourced wisdom from millions of my ancestors, of your ancestors, of my ancestors, about what it means to be human, about how to be a good person, about how to live a worthy life. Guess what? Sarah, the former speechwriter for the President of the United States, embraced her Judaism in the most profound way. But she points out one fascinating point. What really touched her was Judaism's insistence not only on being a good person, but on the details of what it means to be a good person. If you choose to turn off the radio right now, I understand. But if you listen on, you're taking the responsibility of hearing what this young lady tells us about what Judaism says, what it means to be a good person. And she gives an example. She learned, there's lots of Jewish thinking around how we use our speech, around things like gossiping and shaming people. Let's just say you and I are colleagues, and we get into a fight at work. I'm so mad at you, I go around and tell a bunch of people, Rachel, she's the worst. I don't think she's ethical. She doesn't work hard. I'm trashing you because I'm so mad. And I feel better. I got it off my chest. And then, let's say the next day, we come in, and I realize there was a misunderstanding, and you had something going on in your personal life. And we make up, and we apologize. Well, those people I trashed, the people who are watching and listening, they've gone. You let it out. You came back. You apologize. But everybody else who was listening, they've gone on and told other people about what was going on, how terrible you are. And maybe a month from now, that's Rachel, goes to apply for a job at another company. And guess who's at that company? One of those same people who heard you bash and put to shame poor Rachel. And what are they going to say at that point? What do they say to the boss? Have you seen this yet before? Oh, yeah. She worked in the other company that we worked at, but I heard all kinds of bad things about her. Let's hold back on that. I've put these words out into the world, says Sarah, And guess what? Once you put those words out, you can't take them back. It's a daily occurrence. I've done it countless times, she says. And there are Jewish ethical stories, tons of them, about how that exact scenario and how much of this kind of gossiping and how much harm it creates. Fluffy sentiments like be kind are beautiful, but they are useless in the everyday world unless you act on them very concretely and specifically with the people before you. And she says, Sarah, Judaism is one big mindfulness practice. It is a constant practice of being present with what's around you. She learned every time an observant Jew will say a blessing over food, it's like you're stopping and you're appreciating the miracle of the fact that you have food on your table, which many people in this world do not have. Same thing with saying a blessing after going to the bathroom. The mindfulness of appreciating that the plumbing is working, not only in the bathroom, but in the person's body, is one beautiful way of recognizing the miracle of our own body working properly, Baruch Hashem. So Sarah is right. People who know how to stick their fingers into their ears, literally or conceptually, live a much more happier, friendlier, and more relaxed lives. When people just talk about other people negatively, my friends, it creates rifts. It creates miscommunications. It creates fights. It creates lots of anguish. One sign of how seriously Judaism takes this is in the prayer that we say every single day, at least 3 times a day. You can take a pencil out, my friends, or you can take out a biro. Anybody know what a biro is? Kim, you know what a biro is? Yeah, you do know what a biro is. Unbelievable. We have such learned people around here. It's what we call today is a pen or whatever, right? We call it a pick? A bic. A bic, right, a bic. There you go. So, what do we say 3 times a day? Are you writing this down, my friends? It's every single time I do my Amidah service, we say the following words. May my God guard my tongue from evil and my lips from deceitful speech. To those who curse me, let my soul be silent. May my soul be to all like the dust. You know, the opening line of that same prayers. What is it in the traditional Siddur? Hashem Sefosai Tiftach. We actually say every day, open my lips. We ask God to open my lips and say, Sefosai Tiftach upiyagiti lesecha, that my mouth may declare praise. That when we open our big mouths, nice things are being said. Caring words are being said. As Lynn Feldman points out, Lashon Hara, gossip talk, kills 3 people. You know, the person who's saying it, the one who's listening, and of course, even the person who's not there. So you see how careful we must be. This is what Sarah Horowitz shared with us. I want to share with you a little bit more about the impact of a word. The impact of a word. An individual called Yuval Harari wrote a book. He tells a fascinating story. During World War II, BBC News was broadcast to Nazi-occupied Europe. Each news program opened with a live broadcast of Big Ben tolling the hour. The purpose was to amplify the magical sound of freedom. And coming from London, it's always wonderful to travel to central London and see the Big Ben and hear the sounds. But these broadcasts actually led to an unexpected danger. The ingenious German physicist found a way to determine the weather conditions in London based on the tiny differences in the tone of the broadcast ding-dongs. They could tell from the sound of the Big Ben the temperature, the humidity, the air pressure, the effect sound transmission, and by comparing successive Big Ben broadcasts, they actually got, right, from different comparing, they got useful data about the conditions. This information was fed to the Luftwaffe, where it was used to improve bombing strategy. Hester Meiser. When the British Secret Service discovered this, they replaced the live broadcast with a set recording of the famous clock. Why do I share this with you, my friends? As I say good morning to David Zarabi. This teaches us the power and the impact of a word. For each word creates both physical and spiritual airwaves, which travel and leave their mark. Before I open my mouth to speak to my dear wife, to my child, to a family member, an employee, to a stranger, to anybody, I must realize that words have power, sometimes invisible power, far beyond my imagination, just as the radio broadcast of Big Ben. Of course, when I'm talking about something or someone hurting me, to heal and find a way dealing with it, for example, when a person is confronted with someone about something or they said or how that hurt you, or talking to a therapist about a painful relationship, obviously in that environment you're allowed to talk and speaking because it's set for a productive conclusion to help the person. Then it is appropriate and useful. But when I'm just talking to anyone and everyone about other people negatively, hello, Judaism sees it as an extremely negative and toxic act. Another idea that we share, and I share with you, dear friends. Benjamin Zander is a British Jew. His family escaped Hitler in 1938. Today he is the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra, a world-renowned composer and conductor. Back in 2008, this Benjamin Zander gave a TED Talk. It was called The Transformative Power of Classical Music. But this is how he ended his story, his talk. What we say really makes a difference. The words that come out of our mouth matter. I learned this, he says, from a woman who survived Auschwitz, one of the rare survivors. She went to Auschwitz when she was 15 years old, and her brother was 8, and the parents were lost. And she told me this. She said, "We were in the train going to Auschwitz, and I looked down and I saw my brother's shoes were missing." And the 15-year-old said, "Why are you so stupid? Can't you keep your things together, for goodness sake?" The way an elder sister might speak to a younger brother. Unfortunately, it was the last thing she ever said to him, because she never saw him again. He did not survive. And so, when she came out of Auschwitz, she made a vow. She said the following: "I walked out of Auschwitz into life, and I made the following vow." And the vow was like this: "I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever said." I'm going to repeat it so I can hear it again. "I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever said." Now, can we do that? No. But it is possibly, to live into it, to think about this, to be careful. How many times when we're quiet by ourselves and things don't go wrong, we let out a curse word? French fries, cholent with SH. Why? What do we have to say these terrible words for? God forbid if they end up being the person's last words and someone heard and they say, "What do you remember about my loved one?" Oh, you know what she said? She let out a nice, beautiful curse word. Is that what we're living for? Is that why God gave us the power to speak, to curse, to say negative things? So she said again, "I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I will ever say." Despite the Torah's prohibition of gossip, we read the stories about Joseph and his brothers, Miriam who spoke about her brother, the spies. Despite the unparalleled strictures against evil speech by the sages, somehow, dear friends, lashon hara, evil gossip, remains a problem throughout history and still does today. Every leader is subject to this. The sages say that when Moses left his tent early in the morning, people would say, you see, you know why he's leaving early from his house? He must have had a fight with his wife. If he leaves late, they would say he must be plotting against us. This is what we know. Allowing people to speak badly about one another will eventually destroy the integrity of the group. Evil speech generates negative energies. Within the group, it sows the seeds of distrust and envy. Directed outside the group, it can lead to arrogance, self-righteousness, racism, prejudice, all of which are fatal to the moral credibility of any team. Whether or not you are a leader of such a group, you must politely make it clear that you will have nothing to do with this kind of speech, that it has no place in your conversations. Cyberbullying is one of the latest manifestations of what I would call lashon hara, evil gossip. The story of Hannah Smith that I began with, and other teenage suicides, is a tragic reminder of how right the sages were to reject the idea that words can never harm me. I grew up with this kind of song, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never harm me. Judaism rejects that idea. No, bad words, hurtful words can harm someone, and insists to the contrary that evil speech kills. Free speech is not speech that costs nothing. It is a speech. What's the definition of free speech? I know I'm going to lose half my listening audience now. Because, you know what? It is a speech. What is free speech? It is a speech that represents the freedom and the dignity of others. Forget this, and free speech becomes very expensive indeed. If you want to live a life of integrity and peacefulness, let's make sure to remember why our fingers are shaped like pegs. So in a moment's call, we can declare, sorry, my ears are too sensitive, too sacred, too pure, too holy to absorb all this toxicity. I want to hear words that will heal and bring love and understanding. The genesis of a mindful life is being fully present, especially when you are speaking words or listening to words. I can't control what others want to tell me, but I can always control what I'm going to listen to. With this, I want to share with you something that really, really bothers me. A particular lethal form of gossip is when we encounter constantly when it comes to Israel. Take the latest Jenin operation to root out terrorist cells in Jenin. Israel was immediately accused of horrible crimes when in reality, Israel achieved an exceptional level of success accompanied by an unusually low casualty rate. Official reports indicate that out of the 12 who were killed and the 20 severely injured, none of them were civilians. Each individual was found to be armed or carrying explosives. Unlike the wholesale slaughter that accompanies military operations executed by most other countries, as we are currently witnessing in the senseless violence and loss of life in the war being waged by Russia against Ukraine, Israel's primary objective is to minimize loss of life. The exceptional professionalism of the soldiers deployed to Jenin at the forefront is incredible, my friends. These experienced IDF soldiers, sadly including David Yehuda Yitzhak, Olav Hashalom Hashem Yimkam Damai, who was slain during this withdrawal, received explicit instructions to adhere strictly to the mission's objectives and not to harm any civilians. And throughout its 75-year history, Israel has maintained an unwavering commitment to minimizing collateral damage and safeguarding civilian lives during military operations. With a profound regard for value and the sanctity of human life, Israeli military planners have consistently pursued precise and targeted strategies. Through painstaking intelligence gathering and the utilization of the latest technology and all its capabilities, and at the expense of its own armed forces' safety, Israel's armed forces have always sought to mitigate the impact on innocent civilians while effectively countering security threats, which are often existential for Israel, while their foes particularly aim at killing as many civilians as possible. The fact that the two are compared as though there's some moral equivalence is nauseating. It is a slander that no decent human being should ever be part of. It's a chutzpah of the highest degree, and its perpetrators must be called out on this unforgivable crime of slander against a country that, if it was to put down its arms for a single day, would be, God forbid, obliterated. Chas v'shalom. Therefore, we need to be prouder and more authentic, and know when it's time to stick our fingers into our ears, not to listen to voices that tell us to lay down and die. I want to thank you all for listening today, and as we say in our prayers, these words: my God, guard my tongue from evil and my lips from deceitful speech. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you so much.